Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Ms. Talbot, roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Borrowy,
I am present.
Mr. Jenks,
Here.
Ms. Nichols,
Here.
Chairman Orris,
Here.
Ms. Pavano,
Here.
Mr. Slocum,
Here.
Mr. Talbot,
Here.
Mr. Veliver,
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The
of the
flag
United States of
United
America,
States of America,
to the
to
republic
the republic
for which it stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty
liberty and justice
justice
for
for
all. Okay. The first item on our agenda this evening, and the most significant item time-wise, is our discussion with Cheshire State Legislative Delegation regarding the Town Council's legislative recommendations. And I want to welcome our three representatives, Liz Lenahan, Leslie Zupkis, and Craig Fishbein, and our Senators Mary Abrams and Rob Sampson. Thank all five of you for being here this evening. That's great. It's a testament to all of your commitment to your work and what you do in the groups that you reflect and represent. So thank you for all being here. This is really important that we do this on an annual basis so that we as a council can talk directly to you without a whole lot of other interruptions. So we really try to schedule this without much else on the agenda so we can kind of chat for as long as we all think is important. So thank all five of you for being here and taking the time to hear from us as we see what's important to the town of Cheshire. As you all know, we sent out a list of 7 legislative recommendations for 2021 that we as a council agreed on. I want to be very clear that this was a consolidated list. Each of the council members had, some had some other ideas that are certainly important to the community, but we felt that we kind of dwindled this list down. I think last year it was a long list, and we felt that maybe it could be too long and maybe be too cumbersome and not really reflect the things that are most important and be more confusing to all of you as to what's representative of our community. So we tried to dwindle it down to 7 items that we think are really important to our community, that our council supports. And we certainly are looking forward to having some meaningful dialogue with all 5 of you tonight. We do have some staff here as well. And I'll just briefly summarize. I know you all got these ahead of time, so you've had ample time to review them and think about them. But we have kind of 5 general items and then 2 very Cheshire specific items. The first item is some concerns that we have with our 2020 police accountability bill. And I think, the council does have some concerns about this bill. We certainly understand the need to do some reform to an extent, but there are some things in this bill that concern us. We have our police chief, Neil Dreif, here tonight, who has attached a letter kind of succinctly explaining some of the things that he thinks are concerning to him. And I think the council feels similarly. So that's the first item on our agenda. We then have the juvenile justice reform item, which we've been talking about for a while. As we all know, the break-ins statewide have just been really aggressive. They don't seem to be waning at all. And we feel as though, based in consultation with our police chief and other public safety people, that, the law is just too relaxed for those committing the crimes, and we need to hold them more accountable. So we'd like to talk a little bit more about that item. We then have the prevailing wage issue, which the state was nice enough to increase the new construction to $1 million, but we've never increased the renovation number above 100,000. So we think that it would be appropriate, particularly in these economic times with inflation, to raise that to 400,000, would certainly help save us some dollars on some significant projects. So once again, we're going to be pushing for that. We have a binding arbitration issue where we're asking for some timeframes to be placed into the arbitration process. As you probably all know, we did have a police contract that the arbitration didn't settle for 23 months, and that's not helpful to anybody. So we're hoping that maybe we can get some collars on binding arbitration. We did have something in here which was really important to our Energy Commission, which is enabling legislation for community choice aggregation for energy. So we've left that in. And then we get to the two really Cheshire specific issues, which is the transfer of the school bus depot property from the state to the town of Cheshire. As you know, we lease that, I think, for $1 a year, whatever the nominal amount is. And we're very thankful to the state that they do that. But it is a contract that can go away kind of at the state's needs. And it limits us, our ability to really want to invest much in that property. We would like to put some permanent buildings there, and we're hesitant to invest taxpayer dollars into a property that we just don't own and could be taken away, at any time in the future by the state. So that's something we would like to have you all advocate for us. And then there's another one, number 7, which is upgrading Route 68 and 70. And as you all know, this was a bike route in Connecticut DOT's active transportation plan, which was finalized in 2019. As you all are probably aware, that West Main corridor for a lot of us is a critical potential development and economic driver for us in the future. And the more that we can make that area safe, pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, we think just moves hand in hand with what we would like to see to continue to happen in that area. And we would love to have you to continue to advocate for us in that area, particularly since it's something the state has already identified. And maybe we can work towards, again, enhancing some safety items and pedestrian friendly items in that area. So those are the 7 items. I'm sorry if I was long-winded, but I just did want to give you a summary. I'll certainly open it up. We're probably going to have some good dialogue here, but I'll offer it to council members. If any council member would like to add anything that I've said in summary, and then we can certainly turn it over to all of you, the state reps and senators, for some dialogue and question and answer. Council members, anything? Okay, I think we've got a lot of questions which will be coming down the road. Ms. Pavano, I'm sorry, did I miss you?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak on the juvenile justice reform. It seems that the penalties just don't seem to be strong enough for our youth. And the same people youth are committing crimes over and over again. I would like to reiterate on that and say that this is a very important bill and something that all of you should be looking at very seriously. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. And anything I missed or anything that any of you council members would like to add to my summary, please jump in. Okay, with that, we'll turn it over to any of the member of our delegation, either, yes, I see Senator Sampson.
Hello there, Mr. Chairman. And
hello, Senator. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and delighted, of course, to see everybody's face in little boxes like Hollywood Squares on my screen. And excited to get back to the legislature and start doing the business of the people of the state. It's been far too long. Considering the past year, we've really been pushed out of the legislative lawmaking decision process in a large measure by the governor's seizure of power. Aside from 2 special sessions that were limited in scope, we haven't had a lot of chance to debate a lot of these items. And I note that this list looks a lot like your previous list, although, like you said, it is shorter. So thank you for that. Although I don't blame you for asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. I met with my staff attorneys today, and I think I'm going to propose somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 bills this cycle. And that's because, you want to try and set a wish list and let everyone know what it is. And in my case, I'm also trying to set an agenda so people understand what I believe the Connecticut Republican Party has to offer. But I will just say very briefly, and I wanted to go first because you only got me till 7 o'clock, unfortunately. But going through the items on the list, number 1, the police accountability bill. I think it's no secret that there are concerns with that bill. I am hopeful that the legislature will pick it up to make some changes. I don't know what the appetite from the majority party is, but every Republican voted against this bill, including myself, and we are going to certainly work to undo the troublesome aspects of it. Juvenile justice reform. These issues are a result of a series of bills that happened in recent years. Second Chance Society, excessive use of force. There were several bills all aimed at essentially reducing the impact of law enforcement on juvenile crime. But I think that the majority has gone far too far in that case, and that we need to bring it back. Again, these are largely majority party measures. I'm not saying that to point fingers. I'm just saying that the Democrats did these bills maybe with good intentions, but I think they've gone too far. Republicans have opposed them. I will be proposing legislation to crack down on the car theft situation, as I did last year and the year before. I'll just note that my colleague, Representative Fishbein, is going to be the ranking Republican member of the Judiciary Committee, and I also serve on the committee, and I look forward to working with him on those items. And that said, he's a former member of the Labor Committee. I don't know if Craig's still on Labor or not, but I will be the ranking member on the Labor Committee, and you certainly have my support on the prevailing wage and binding arbitration issues. The energy thing, I don't know too much about. Happy to listen. Obviously, I'm very concerned about high energy rates in the state of Connecticut, and we'll work to do anything to allow Cheshire residents to pay less for their electricity. The transfer of the property, I will serve again as the ranking member on GAE, and I will certainly fight to make sure that that becomes a reality. The problem with any of these transfers is that most of the time what you end up haggling over is everyone wants it to be fair for everyone else. So if one town is going to get a particular benefit in the purchase of a property from the state, then another legislator will be looking for the same arrangement. So we'll work to do our best on that. I've worked with all of our colleagues in both parties on this type of thing in the past before, and we've been pretty successful. So we'll try again. And then finally, on the last situation, I don't know a lot about this, but I will. You have my commitment to work with you on that item as well. And I'm sorry for going so long, but I wanted to give you my take on those 7 items as quickly as I could.
No, well, thank you, Senator Sampson. And I can tell you from our perspective, these are Cheshire items that are important to all of Cheshire. This was a bipartisan collection of items that came forward. Not everything from everybody got put on here, and I want to be clear on that. But at the end of the day, I believe we all supported the list that is here. So what we're really looking for you all is to put the politics aside, figure out a way to collaborate together. And which of these items, obviously we'd like them all because they're all important to us, but what can you all figure out a way to collaborate on in a bipartisan manner rather than point fingers? And I'm not suggesting any of you are doing that, but we run the same issue in our local politics, but what we need to do is find places to have commonality. And that's really what we're going to be looking to push you all towards, is where can you find some common ground that's going to benefit the town of Cheshire? And that's really why we're here tonight, and why these items are important to us. I don't think we all recognize we're going to get every one of them, but darn it, we'd like to start checking some of these off. And we're sick and tired of seeing these same items over and over and over and over again. And I think the Cheshire community looks at us and says, "What the hell are you guys doing over there? You just do the same items. It's a rubber stamp. Nothing gets done." We would like to change that. So we need your cooperation in order to do that. And that's what we're looking for. So I see, yes, Ms. Zupkis, and then we'll go to Ms. Abrams.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice to see y'all. I did make a comment in the beginning. It's so nice to see you. I would like to see you in person, but I'm glad I don't have to wear that mask. So I'm glad to see each of you here. And you, Rob, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, these are things that we have seen before from you. And I know personally, I've put in these as pieces of legislation, and I hope that we can all, as a Cheshire delegation, come together on these things for the betterment of Cheshire. I'm not going to go through bill by bill. I'll just say that, the police accountability bill, I hope there's work to be done. I don't necessarily personally believe that there's going to be enough people willing to do anything about that bill, but hopefully there will be. And Chief, I will personally take your items and make sure that that is part of the negotiation, because I could not agree with you more. So I will make it my cause, and I hope everybody will join me in that, to do that. As far as the other things, the juvenile justice reform, what really concerns me about it, and it was mentioned here, is I'm afraid that really it's going to come down to something that's going to be very tragic. where one of these kids are going to break into somebody's car, get the garage clicker, go in the house, and then somebody's not going to make it out. So that really concerns me, that bill. As you mentioned, it's gotten worse over time, and it's a slap on the wrist. And there comes a point where kids, as I hold my kids accountable, they need to be held accountable time and time again doing the same crimes. So definitely pushing for that. The prevailing wage, I couldn't agree with you more. Binding arbitration, you know, if Rob, you put those in on your committees, I will definitely sign on to them. I hear it time and time again, especially with the binding arbitration. It goes forever. And as you said, it does no one any good. Energy, I don't know a lot about. And honestly, I don't see how any of us could not come together on number 6 and number 7. I will mention number 7. Jim, I know that I had called DOT last year and talked about it, and their comment to me was, it's not a problem. Once they go in and do either work on the road or put in new plans, that's an automatic. So I'm not sure if this is because there's work been done on 68 and 70 and it wasn't put in, or what. But I was told when I looked into that a year or so ago that that is how it takes place and how it happens, and it should not be a problem. So
Well, yeah, I mean, what's automatic now is the state's complete streets policy, where if they are going to resurface and remark a state road, if there is space, they do add enough room on the curbs to allow for potential bike lanes. In the case of West Main, the area we're talking about, it's probably too narrow to add the amount of space that they generally will include when they do pavement remarking. So it may take a bit more creativity. There's still room there to do something, but it's going to take a bit more creativity than what they currently kind of automatically do.
And I believe down Mountain Road, it's just in the center of the street to let people know, be aware that they're
Right.
bikers, right?
Right. That's the purpose of the markings on Mountain Road.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, by the way, for giving me your time last year up there at the Transportation Committee hearing, and it allowed me to get in there early and then go back to work for the rest of the day. So thank you again for that.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks, and thank you, Ms. Upkis. And I think, Ms. Abrams, you had your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate your comments as well. And to the degree that we can work together on things for the betterment of Cheshire, that is the purpose and why I really appreciate you asking us here tonight, because hearing what's important to you helps me do a better job of representing Cheshire. So I thank you for your time and letting us have time to do that. Like you said, many of these things we talked about when we met around this time last year. We went through a lot of them, and we're moving on some of them, as Representative Zupkis had said, was just talking about, like, we had already started, looking into some of these things, and then lo and behold. So let me just speak to a couple of them. Obviously, the upgrading of Route 68 and 70, the transfer of the school bus depot property. I did have one question about that because I just didn't remember. I know we talked about it last year, but when you say that you would do some development on that property, would it be town buildings or storage for town, that kind of thing, if I remember correctly?
No, what we have, and my understanding, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have temporary buildings there. There's nothing permanent. We would like to do upgrades to have better facilities for all of the bus drivers. And obviously the town is hesitant to do so when we just don't know if we're going to have the property long term. We're not interested in investing taxpayer dollars into something that might not be a long-term investment.
Right. So it would be for town use, these buildings. Not okay. That's what I had remembered, but I just wanted to be sure. Yeah. So I think that's something that I would, we were already starting to work on. So I don't see why we wouldn't pick it up again. Also, I know that Representative Lenahan and I had put in legislation in 2019 for number 5 about aggregating energy and giving municipalities those options and choices. So we put something in 2019. We weren't able to get it, moved through, and we were already ready to start it again in 2020. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be picking it up at 2021. And given everything that's happened with power companies in the state, I think it's all the more timely, and hopefully we'll get some more attention because of that. So I'm really interested in that. I had already been looking into the binding arbitration. I remember that reading the information that you gave me previously on that, and that was quite the ordeal that the town went through. So that's certainly something that we can continue to look into. I am not probably on the same page with you. I'm just going to be honest when it comes to prevailing wage, but the good news probably is, or I don't know what, it's going to be kind of neutral, because we are going to be going into an odd session in 2021. So the amount of bills we're going to be able to take up and what people will be taking on is going to be somewhat limited. So although my colleague, Senator Sampson, seems ambitious about what he's going to put in when he was speaking before, but I'm concerned that there will be some limitations just given how the session might or might not go. So I'm not sure that would go anywhere either way, but I just want to
Senator Abrams, can I interrupt you for a moment? I'm just curious as to what is your concern with the prevailing wage issue on the renovations? The state did move the new construction from 400, I believe, to $1 million, but never moved the renovation portion of it from 100 up. So I'm just curious, it seems appropriate if you can get behind the first one, they seem that they should kind of move in a correlated way, but so I'm curious what your concerns are.
I wasn't in the legislature in 2017 when that happened. So maybe that helps you understand.
So you wouldn't have supported the increase of the new construction at the time?
Probably not, to be honest with you. Probably not. But I will say this, I am absolutely open to talking more with you about the renovation piece and looking more into it. I always try to have an open mind, but I just want to be honest about,
and we appreciate that. But from our perspective, with everything going on at the state where, we don't know from year to year what our funding looks like, we need to find ways to save money locally. And these, to me, and I think the balance of our council, are easy places to help us save some dollars. I mean, these are direct bottom line savings. And so, I'm a little perplexed as to why you wouldn't support it. I have my suspicion, but, I'm just curious. From a taxpayer's perspective, it seems like a no-brainer.
I totally hear you. I would say this, though, that I do think that I'm very much aware of the financial difficulties that our state is in and that municipalities are going to be in moving forward, especially because of the pandemic and what that's cost. And I know that Cheshire is doing renovations to your schools and looking to upgrade a lot. So I'm trying to be honest with you and to say that I will try to keep an open mind and listen and look at what you're proposing and how, and I will do my best with that. In terms of the juvenile justice reform piece, I have been hearing, obviously, this crime spree is happening all over the state. So I am interested in looking at whether or not what the effect really is of what our current laws are on juvenile justice and whether or not that is having a negative impact. And, I worked with kids my whole life, mainly high school kids. And I do believe that you have to hold young people accountable and that we're not doing them favors if we don't hold them accountable to what they're doing. So I am interested in looking into that more so. We did vote on a diversion program. I think it was a Senator Pisano bill that he introduced, and I think many of the Republicans were on it and voted for it as well. So it was more bipartisan to look for diversion programs for kids. And maybe I'll leave that. Maybe I don't want to put you in a position, Representative Fishbein, but you could probably talk to that much more clearly than I can. So I will leave that for you to discuss. And lastly, the police accountability bill. As you know, I voted for it. I am all about making sure that I read the chief's information, obviously, that you provided. I'd like to have some more conversations with the chief if he's open to that about it. I will definitely share it and make sure that people, it's my understanding that there are conversations happening. So I think it's important that they hear what I hear. I think that's part of my job, is to bring back information to people in Hartford to say, look, the town of Cheshire, the chief has said that they're struggling with these certain aspects of it. Some of it, maybe it's not being communicated clearly, as you said in your letter, that there's some open for interpretation, and that's leaving you feeling obviously uncomfortable. And so I'm happy to go up and talk about that and continue the conversation with the chief.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. And Chief Drive, thank you for being here. Certainly jump in if there's something you would like to add relative to the police accountability bill. We have a lot of respect and certainly support Chief Drive and his crew. I know he feels pretty passionately about, his letter and what he wrote. So the fact that you would hopefully all be open-minded to the concerns that we have and that he has is really what we're looking for, and to create a dialogue between all of you. You may not get consensus, but the fact that you have open dialogue is really what we're looking for. And Ms. Abrams, I thank you for your comment earlier that you're being honest about possibly not supporting certain aspects of the things we're asking for. I understand that, and so does the full council. This is not about getting everything we want. It's about being respectful to each other and having an open dialogue and an honest dialogue. And we can respectfully disagree and move forward. And that's really what we need more of. I got to tell you, I'm really tired. I'm going to say this, and maybe I'll be chastised for it, but I'm tired of the divisiveness that's going on nationally. It's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the town of Cheshire, and it's not good for our residents and our taxpayers. And we all need to set a good example by, even when we have differences, that we can differ respectfully, we can have open dialogue, we can collaborate and cooperate, and if we agree to disagree, so be it. But we don't need to be, disrespectful to each other. And so I appreciate your words. We may not agree on something, but it doesn't mean at the end of the day I don't respect your opinion. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I want you to know that I feel the exact same way, and that it's really important to me personally, and in doing this job, to know what your opinion is, even if I might not agree with it. It's going to help me do a better job and listen for the things I should be listening for, and talking about the things I should be talking about, and asking the questions I should be asking. So I appreciate the fact that we can put out whatever we want to put out, whatever our opinions are, and look at those and talk about them. It really is a benefit to me in doing the best job I can to represent Cheshire. So we might not agree, but I never want you to not pick up the phone and talk to me. That goes for any council member or the chief or anybody, and let me know, even if they presume that I might not agree. And I might not, but it's better that I know how you're thinking and what's important to you than to not.
Honest, respectful dialogue is really important. So thank you for that. Mr. Fishbein.
Thank you, Chairman Orison. Thank you once again for having us. This is one of the great things about Cheshire. I know not every town does this, and I appreciate the opportunity, the dialogue, the back and forth. Starting with the police accountability bill, there's very few occupations where husband or wife will leave the home in the morning. The spouse doesn't know whether or not they're going to return at night. And unfortunately, with the police accountability bill, language was put out. It had no public hearing. Legislators were not allowed to hear from those men and women that put their life on the line every day for us about the effect of the language. So now the language is out there. It's being field tested, basically. And we knew there was problems to begin with. And there are discussions. I have met with my Democratic leadership on the Judiciary Committee. I've indicated to them that there will be strong overtures to change portions of this bill. And I appreciate the memo from Chief Drive. There is one part that I have a little bit of difficulty with, and it's the consent search aspect. You know, when somebody's pulled over and an officer, you know, somebody who we respect, we should look up to, asks whether or not they have permission to search your vehicle, it's very difficult for a person who's innocent to answer that question. You know, the fear is if you answer it no, that you look like a suspect. If you answer it yes, you're going to perhaps get into more trouble. That's a discussion that we have to have. So, you know, reopening the consent search as far as it was before, I think is going to be a problem. But there are certainly places that that bill has to change. And there's other areas, you know, Section 41 of the bill actually, I believe, is in violation of the Equal Protections Clause of the Constitution. What it says is that if a decertified Connecticut police officer wants to be a security guard, they can't. But it doesn't preclude a decertified police officer from another state serving in that capacity. If public policy is that a decertified police officer should not be a security officer, it should be a decertified officer from any state. You can't treat people from different states differently. That's going to have to change. The military product, I don't know if this applies to Cheshire, but you know, if we have faith in our law enforcement to acquire product at a cheaper rate because it's a program offered by the feds, either we have that faith or we don't. And for the bill to say you have to get rid of all of this equipment, which included night vision goggles, boats, you know, things like that, I think is a little bit far. So there will be changes. On the juvenile justice situation, you know, I did put in a bill the last two sessions because right now, the way the juvenile justice transferring a case from juvenile court to adult court, the balance is whether or not it's of the benefit to the accused. And my bill would have the benefit, the balance to be to society. I think that's what we should be looking at. You know, so the other, you know, I heard the penalties should be harsher. The problem with that, quite frankly, is then judges are more apt not to sentence someone. If you think about that, if the penalty for shoplifting is the death penalty, you know, which is egregious, okay? Nobody's ever going to serve the penalty for shoplifting, right? So that's one of the things you got to look at too. You know, I think the diversionary program, which I did support, was something I didn't know about before I got to the legislature, that a juvenile for certain crimes was not afforded the ability to do accelerated rehabilitation. If an adult had committed those same crimes, they would be able to do AR, which results in a dismissal. So, you know, you have the child who gets exposed to the system, you know, they have to do something to get their AR, as opposed to just, you know, leaving. You know, that's a step in the right direction. I had a question, the binding ARB situation. Or what? What is the punchline? Because, you know, I get this a lot of times. Like I just got a decision out of the Department of Public Health on a hearing yesterday. And the hearing was back in July. And the statute says decision shall be rendered in 90 days. But there's no punchline. So what would the council have if you have this provision, you know, arbitration should come back within this period of time? What happens if it doesn't come back in that period of time?
Well, I can only say, I think that's for you to all decide. Our point is that we need some resolution sooner than we're getting it, because 23 months on a police contract is not beneficial to the town of Cheshire and not beneficial to our police officers. So that's the big issue. And certainly any other council members, dive right in if you feel differently.
Yeah, I don't disagree about the problem. It's the solution, because That's what I'm going to get up in Hartford. You know, what are you looking for? You know, when you go to regular court, you know, arbitration is a pseudo, it's an adjudicative process. You know, on a regular motion or a trial, a judge has 120 days, but there is no penalty if the judge, you know, they get a black mark on their review. Okay. An appeal to the appellate court or the Supreme Court, there is no provision. So, like, I had a case before the appellate court, 4 years to get a decision, you know, because you want the best decision. But, you know, so that's something to think about. I'm certainly willing to open to whatever suggestions, but that's what I'm going to get up in Hartford.
Well,
Is there
thank
some?
you for that, Mr. Fishbein. As an attorney, you know, you certainly have much more in-depth knowledge on this than we do. So, you know, certainly any advice or thoughts that you have on that from your professional background would be helpful. I think you all understand our concern is that, you know, more time is not good for us. It's not good for anybody, in our opinion. So we're just trying to find a way to have some kind of accountability to say, okay, you need to shorten the process. You need to figure it out either way. And we all need to move forward, because going 23 months without a contract with anybody is just not good. So, you know, any of your professional input or what the rest of you have, you know, we would look forward to having collaboration on that. And I see Mr. Veliver, who's also an attorney, raising his hand. So maybe you can jump in, Mr. Veliver.
Great. Well, thank you. And Craig, I think that's a great point. You know, you're right in the sense that, and I think Chairman Morris is right too. I mean, ultimately, this is something that's going to have to be worked out. At least if this is something that can at least be brought to a discussion, if we at least get to the point where we're discussing or what, that's probably a starting point right there that we're even discussing it. But I mean, I guess ideally from a town's perspective, I think if we had to come up with an answer, I think the resolution would be, if you don't, then the town's last best offer becomes the resolution. You know, something like that. Whatever the town, you know, if it's not resolved, then I think whatever the town's offer was becomes the default resolution. I mean, that can be worked out, but I think from a town's perspective, I think municipalities would want that to be the resolution. So I just throw that out there as a starting point. Probably would never get to something as one-sided as great, the town wins if it doesn't come to that point. But that would be my suggestion. I mean, ultimately, if we're looking for what's beneficial to the town, it would be probably what's the town's last offer. So that would just be my suggestion on that. But I thank you for bringing that point, and I think that is a very important point. But hopefully, we'll even get to that discussion.
So
Thank
Mr.
you,
Slocum wanted
Mr.
to comment.
Veliver. Yeah. Mr. Fishbein, anything before Mr. Slocum jumps in?
Yeah, I just, on the energy thing, is there some law that precludes, you know, so like I know for a period of time, the houses that border between Wallingford and Cheshire up on Ray Avenue off of Cook Hill Road, they were serviced by Wallingford Electric. Is there some preclusion if Wallingford Electric, let's say, wanted to expand into Cheshire, that would not allow Cheshire residents to opt into that? Because I was puzzled when I saw this language.
I can't answer that, but I can tell you from my perspective, the more competition we can offer to our constituents, the better off we're going to be. As you all know, you know, and I certainly don't want to bash Eversource, but, you know, we've had some concerns with their, you know, their ability to perform in storm situations, et cetera. And, you know, we all stood together, you know, in front of Town Hall having some concerns. And I think what we're saying is when you have one opportunity to pursue a certain utility, that's not best for the constituents. So I can't answer your question. I think we would all love to have Wallingford Electric roll in here. I'm just not convinced it's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, and my point is, if there is no bar to that by statute, then maybe Sean makes a call. You know, can we talk? Because I know North Branford, there's a portion of North Branford that's serviced by Wallingford also.
Well, I see Mr. Kimball raising his hand, so maybe he can add some information on this.
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on the community choice aggregation proposal, as I understand it from the Energy Commission, that has more to do with the selection of the supplier than delivery. So if you think back to, you know, customers' options to choose their supplier, this proposal, which, as I understand it, takes enabling legislation And I think a handful of states have done so, but Connecticut hasn't to date. It allows, should a municipality want to take on the role and responsibility of forming, a municipal entity, so to speak, to select on behalf of its residents preferred suppliers, possibly green suppliers, depending on, if you wanted that local control over who, and kind of leverage the power of the group, so to speak. And in addition, having it be a default energy supplier. So that's, as I understand it, some of the models are. So it's a little different than the question on the delivery with respect to whether we could partner with Wallingford. I actually have had some conversations with Wallingford related to that, just to get a better understanding, as to what some of the options are there. On that's sort of less of a state legislation, as I understand it, requirement. And this piece specifically is related to, again, to supply.
Okay, that's all I have.
And thank you, Mr. Kimball, on that. And we certainly understand that, but I think we'd be all ears on what Mr. Fishbein is suggesting as well. I see Mr. Barwi, but I don't want to forget Mr. Slocum. My apologies, Mr. Slocum. I thought that Mr. Fishbein might be reacting to what Mr. Veliver had said, so I just wanted to put you on the side for a minute. But let's go to you first, and then we'll go to Mr. Barwi, if you don't mind.
Well, mine actually was a simple reaction to what Mr. Fishbein had said about as to what's the consequence. I think that's sort of irrelevant in a manner of speaking. If there's no statutory statement on when a binding arbitration hearing has to be resolved, can't we just insert 90 days? And maybe they would just try and comply. Can't we be as simple as that? This just sounds like lawyerly talk to just say or what. We just want it to have a time frame. I think that's very simple. We could argue about or what, but I don't think that's how you get it solved. So just put a time limit on it, 90 days, 180 days, whatever it is. Is that crazy, or am I just a Philistine from the valley? I just don't get the legislative process.
I didn't know you were from the valley, Mr. Slocum.
Well, I'm pretty low. I'm just above sea level where I live. Yeah.
Well, I was from Naugatuck, so I didn't realize you were a fellow valley guy. That's something I learned tonight. Interesting.
No, I live next to wetlands in Cheshire, so that's about as low as you get. So, but anyway.
Mr. Fishbein, I don't know if you have any reaction to Mr. Slocum's comment, but certainly I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll go over to Mr. Barwi.
No, I understand the policy, but usually, I understand Mr. Slocum's position.
It's angst. It's angst. It's not angst. A position.
Okay. And maybe that is the way to, and maybe the result is that the arbitrator who doesn't comply, maybe there's a grading, which doesn't happen now, and then, arbitrators that don't produce their product within that statutory period, they get a black spot on their record, and through attrition, people don't use them because they're not using the process. So maybe it works without a or what. So no, I understand and I appreciate the comment. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
And we'll go to Mr. Barwi.
Thank you, Mayor Orris. Regarding the energy, and we had a committee years ago that was trying to look at the unique position of Cheshire, being right next to UI, being in the territory of CLMP at the time, and being right next to a municipal system in Wallingford, where we were ready to disenfranchise, and we were ready to either join UI, or we were ready to join Wallingford, or just become our own. Well, the year after, we had a legislator from Prospect, prior to Representative Zupkis, who made sure that the state law made it difficult for anybody else but the existing 7 municipal systems to be municipal systems and to aggregate and save money for our communities. So I would love the freedom of being able to look into the possibility of having a system like Wallingford, where you've got the whole community that helps. You have Public Works that maybe helps do some things. You have some ways that you can make it a big economic engine and driver because you aggregate your electricity and get it cheaper. So it would be great if there was a possibility of undoing the law that our own representative worked against us to limit our options. And that would be terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow, and thank you. You're a wealth of knowledge. It's really great having you on the council because you have so much history as someone who was here long ago. So I can tell you from my perspective, it's great having you because having that historical knowledge is helpful. And I didn't know what you just said, so thank you for that.
And Chairman Orris, one of the other benefits of the Wallingford Electric that a lot of people don't know about, but a portion of the rates every year by ordinance are paid to the town as a pilot, and that is solely used for capital expenditures. On average, I've been on the council for about 10 years, it's a little over $2 million every year comes from ratepayers to the town for those capital expenditures, which we wouldn't have. We'd be raising taxes without that. Another benefit.
Very interesting, Mr. Fishbein. Thank you. Mr. Fishbein, are you all set with your comments?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to go to Miss Linehan. My apologies, Miss Linehan. I realized that I have to confess, I had to have Mr. Kimball send me a note that there was a blue hand, and I am certainly not technologically appropriate here on Zoom, so my apologies. I never saw it. So sorry, Miss Linehan.
Apologies aren't necessary. I have to say, though, it's really adorable that you run these Zoom meetings and have no idea what you're doing, but technologically, but you have great ideas on everything else. I would never take offense by anything you did, Mr. Chairman. I think you're fantastic.
Compliment. I'm not sure. A little bit of a compliment, but not so much. But thank you.
It's just Zoom etiquette.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's actually nice that I'm going last because I don't need to beat a dead horse and talk about absolutely everything. So I really just have some follow-up questions, and I'm going to direct these to you, Mr. Chairman, so you can speak for the council. You had said that your list of priorities, or the council list of priorities, that they were edited, that there were originally more in there. And so that begs the question, two questions. I noticed there's nothing about bonding for the school modernization. Does that mean that we're not anywhere near a point where you're ready for an ask?
No, that's not the case. School modernization is actively doing the work that they need to be doing. There are deadlines within which they have to provide their findings or whatever their recommendations are. And it's my understanding, based on what I know, is that if we were to be pursuing grant money for this next coming year, we would need to file paperwork by June. So we don't see these recommendations necessarily, coinciding with what we need to do for school modernization. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that we have nothing here for school modernization does not preclude us from putting an application in by June for whatever grant money or reimbursement money we would be seeking based on the plan that's selected, if one is selected.
Yeah, no, it doesn't preclude you. I just want to make a gentle reminder that this kind of thing is the long pass. And so you should utilize us and keep us in the loop about where this is, give us maybe monthly updates, especially because our incredible Senator Abrams is the vice chair of the Education Committee. These are the kinds of things, these updates would be really good for us so that we know where they are, because a little birdie in people's ears is really important when it comes to these things, especially when we're talking about such a large pot of money. So if you can just a simple email once a month to the group or by the Modernization Committee, just to let us know where we're at, so that we can keep up to date and have those discussions internally within the legislature to say that this will be coming up.
Happy to do that. No problem.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. That's the first thing.
Ms. Nichols is very actively involved and a member of that SMC committee, and I see her raising her hand, so she can probably add some information, Ms. Linehan. Ms. Nichols. You're muted, Ms. Nichols.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging that, Rob. And Liz, we are quite aware of that, and I will pass along your request. I am just one of the council reps, as are Jim and Don. on that committee, but we are prepared, in fact, at our next meeting to be coming up with some more definitive plans, and we would be happy to keep you in the loop. I'll pass that
Great.
along to the chair of the committee. We do have in the works plans to meet with, and I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the agency, but the one that vets the process to look at the projects that we're considering in January. So we have some meetings scheduled with our Collier's representative to talk with that agency to help them guide us in making the decisions that we need to do to make the asks to the state and to you. But I will
Great.
make sure that you're in that loop. So
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? Nothing fancy. Please communicate to the chair that we don't want to report. Just,
No.
you know, a couple lines. Here's where we're at and what we're thinking. Have a great day, kind of thing.
Me in the
Yeah.
loop too, please.
very hard recently to get that all together by the end of this year. So we've had meetings after meetings after meetings.
Great. And unfortunately, I'm not on the education committee this year. Sorry, Mayor. So gone are the days when we would do this together. That's okay. I'm on public health with you. So, so it's really, really important to keep Senator Abrams in the loop too. And that was my first question. My second question is, we were all reeling about the tragic death of the young boy on Weiss Road due to the ice cream truck. I know that I had been speaking with Mr. Jinks, and Mary Abrams and I have been working to do something on a state level. I wanted to know if there was anything that you all have done here in town about a local ordinance or something that we need to be made aware of before we tackle this, whether it be in public health, transportation, or on the Children's Committee.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Veliver's raising his hand as chairman of our ordinance committee, and this is one of the number of items in front of ordinance right now for consideration. So it is in process. We're certainly well aware of it. We are all obviously brokenhearted over that tragedy that occurred here, and we, as council members and through our ordinance committee, is the appropriate place to manage any kind of change in our ordinances that could bolster safety in that area. And it is currently in that committee now for consideration. Depending on what comes out of that committee is something that we can do locally. Obviously, anything that you all want to consider on a statewide level to enhance safety is something we would certainly greatly appreciate. I can tell you we've had general conversation about a lot of safety issues, and I know Mr. Jinks has raised some issues as well, and not all of his items were put on this list. Because we had some differences of opinion as to whether practically they would be safety measures or not. But I can tell you this unequivocally, this council as a full body is very interested in talking about anything that is a safety issue that could be meaningful and practically appropriate for our community and save lives, particularly our children's lives. So yes, we are addressing it in our ordinance committee, and we would certainly love to talk to all of you about what you can do at a statewide level.
Yeah, so let me give you
a, like to add to that.
I was just going to say, if you don't mind, Mr. Veliver, whatever comes out of ordinance, or even if something doesn't come out of ordinance, if you could send me some information, let me give you a little bit of background of the work that I've been doing. As the chairwoman of the Committee on Children, I've been working with DCMC Accident Unit, and they are in charge of looking at safety, not just around the state, but also around the country. They put together a lot of items for me regarding what's been done municipally around the country, and also some state laws around the country. We are now working with the Office of Legislative Research to take that information that they gave and try to put together some data as to whether or not any of those items put in place around the country actually made anything any safer. So as you all know from working with me, I'm a data-driven person. So we're going to get that data back. Senator Abrams and I have been working closely to get this done to make sure that we are providing safe, fun for our kids. It's really important, and especially, you know, we've been working with the parents of the young, and we're going to be moving forward with that. I think that as we move forward on a state level by using that data and determining what would be successful here in the state of Connecticut, to know what you are talking about planning to do in the town of Cheshire would work in concert with us is probably the best move. So if you could share that information, and with that, I mean, I want to say to everybody on the town council, you know, we all represent Cheshire, and so it's best for all of them. I will say that we've been guilty of it too on our end, that we kind of work in pockets. And I think that something as broad, I wouldn't say appeal, you know, interest, as something like this is saving the lives of children, I think we should really all start to work together and work for the betterment of Cheshire and put some maybe hard feelings aside. And I think that this is the thing that's going to start us to do that. And I hope that the relationships continue. And with all of these things, whether they're controversial or not, that we stop working in pockets without communication between us, because I think we will accomplish so much more when we work together, whether it's with the council and the state delegation or and the federal delegation, or if it's even just between parties in our own delegation here on the state level. So with that said, if we could just continue to broadly say, we should all be talking more, we should all be working together more on a variety of issues. And I look forward to working with you guys on all of the issues that we discussed tonight.
Well, the good news on that is that it sounds like it is an issue that's concerning to us locally and an issue that's concerning to you at the state level, which means that we should all be having some thoughtful collaboration on this matter. So I'm glad we brought it up. Mr. Veliber, as chairman, I know is doing a great job in ordinance to move these things along. I'm sure he would be more than happy to collaborate with you, Ms. Lenahan, and any other of our delegation to figure out what is the best way to handle this going forward. So thank you for that.
Sure. And then finally, one more.
Liz, can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
So I want to apologize that I noticed just before the meeting that I had actually drafted you an email that I thought I'd sent you a couple of days ago, and it was sitting in my draft thing on this, because I do remember that you, around the time of that tragedy, you had mentioned that this may be something that come the legislative session was something that you were going to be looking into. So I apologize for not sending that to you earlier, but it is something that I think the fact that if we're going to be drafting an ordinance, it might as well be in conjunction with any potential legislation, because of course there's no point in passing an ordinance that doesn't potentially, that may have to get later get modified to compliance with a state law. Sure. So I will finally take that email out of the draft category and send it to you, and I will reach out to you on that, so that does make. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, one last idea here. You know what? I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but this is not a subject that lends itself to brevity. When we're talking about the juvenile car theft, and my colleague, Representative Zupkis, did say that she has concern about them using the clicker to get in the garage, an escalation. I have to agree completely. The question is, how do we get from the problem to fixing it without making it worse? And there have been discussions about this for years. And I understand that the idea is that kids are coming into the system and we're letting them go. And we've seen that happen. And it's completely unfortunate. But I don't know if necessarily the answer is tougher penalties, send them to jail, because then we're creating long-term hardened criminals. As you all know, I have a great many friends who are corrections officers, and one very close friend actually works over at Manson, who says he just cannot believe that 18-year-olds are put with 23-year-olds or what have you, and that he sees the changes in these kids. So one of the things that we were talking about, like I said before, I'm the chairwoman of the Committee on Children. And with that comes a seat on the Juvenile Justice Policy and Oversight Committee. And what we've been talking about for years is to try to find a better model for juvenile courts. And I agree with Senator Abrams that children do need consequences. Just ask my kids who are running around being crazy, and they understand as soon as I get off this Zoom meeting, there's going to be consequences, but not to make light of it. The truth is that kids do need consequences at every level. And I do not believe that lessening any consequences for children is good for them or the community. However, when we look at the fact that these issues are up across the country, it's not just happening in Connecticut, it's happening everywhere. So as I said before, I'm a data-driven person. So I did ask the Office of Legislative Research to come back to me with information regarding what works in other states. Now, because this is a relatively newish crime rate that's up, there haven't been many things focused largely on that. There are state legislatures across the country who are asking themselves these same questions. But what I did find out is that in states that utilize a drug court, that these drug courts actually reduce recidivism somewhere around 20%. And what a drug court is they take a child or someone who's been doing drugs. It's not really juvenile across the country in drug courts. And they have what Craig Fishbein was talking about, the diversionary programs, but that includes that they need to see the prosecutor and the judge on a weekly basis. They teach them how to interview for a job. They go to drug rehab. They have all of these things that are that keep them in touch with someone multiple times a week for the period of X number of weeks. And that they found that those who complete courses, the recidivism rates are much lower, 20 to 23% in some instances. And if they don't follow through on that, then they are incarcerated. Now, if we look at wanting to do that in the state of Connecticut, I'm very supportive of that. Unfortunately, it's also extremely expensive, and the state doesn't have the ability to do that right now. But what we are looking at is the ability to utilize our juvenile review board system that is already in place and kind of mirror some of those things that happen in drug courts, to mirror that for juvenile car theft courts, so to speak. It's going to be a process. It's not something we could turn around in one session, but it is something that I've been talking about with my leadership, and possibly something that we can do. What are we going to do in the meantime? I don't know. And I really do hope that Representative Fishbein goes into being ranking member of the Judiciary Committee with that same thought that he mentioned earlier, that we need to look at diversionary programs. But I think what's really important is that we're not going into this wanting to make hardened criminals, but we're still holding kids accountable for their actions. And so there's a fine line there, I understand. But we can do that if we work together. I just hear all the time that people think we're not working on it. And I want to tell you that we've been working on it. For myself, I've been working on it for 2 years now. So I look forward to a plethora of new people in the legislature who might have better ideas on how we can do that, how we could fix the problem. But I have to say, I'm not a believer that it's throw them in jail and lock and throw away the key. So hopefully we will all find consensus there. But I wanted to assure you that there are ideas, whether it be through the Judiciary Committee or the JJPOC or the Children's Committee, or all of the people that are involved in that. And the JJPOC has like 80 members. So just know that we're working on it. Any ideas, we'll take them all. But once again, it's got to be data driven. So if you have any ideas of what you've seen work somewhere else, please get that to us. But I just wanted to let you guys know that we are in fact working on this.
Thank you, Ms. Linehan. And
Sure.
I don't think anybody here is of the mindset to just throw them in jail and throw the key away. Clearly, we have an issue. We have a problem. It's more than just a statewide problem. It may be a national problem. But what we all are concerned about is we know we have a problem, and we're all concerned that there could be something more catastrophic coming on both sides, whether it be, the homeowner or whether it be the perpetrator, of which neither of us and none of us want to have happen. So the good news is we recognize there's a problem. What the solution is, I'm not sure we're going to figure that out here tonight, But I think the point is we need to figure it out sooner than later, and we need to collaborate on it. And this is a bipartisan issue. This is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is a statewide issue. It's a Cheshire issue. And I can tell you, you know, my little neighborhood here, we have kind of a neighborhood watch, and I'm very thankful that I have a neighbor down the street who has cameras everywhere, and he can see these perpetrators coming up the road at night, and he sends emails out or texts out to the group that says, you know, they were in our neighborhood the other night. I saw them checking doors. This is a recipe for disaster on all sides, and it's not slowing down. It seems to be accelerating. And so we need everybody at the table to try to figure out what is the best way to manage this situation. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I hope we're all going to sit at the table together and try to figure it out, because it needs to be done. And I see Mr. Slocum raising his hand. Mr. Slocum.
Well, I know, Ms. Lenahan, you speak about how this has to be data driven. I think the problem is driving the data, and the data's bad. And I think the state sort of got itself in this predicament for a few reasons. Some of them is its financial crisis over many years, not just years you've occupied there. And I think it came down to cuts that needed to be made and where they could be made. And that slow erosion of reform is often driven by a desire to save some expense. And I think that's where we have a problem. We don't have the judges to hear cases. We don't have jails that we want to use anymore. And I'm not suggesting these people have to go to jail, but they do have to see some consequences. I'm sorry, they just have to. And we can't wait for all the data on that to come in. We know what the data is. There's a problem. It's a big problem. And to me, again, it's as simple as just saying you can't do it. And if you do it, you're going to get 90 days somewhere. I don't know where. I'm not saying they go to Manhattan at all. But I think it's an easier problem when it's looked at with the degree of common sense. And I think we're at a place in history and time where there's not a real desire to seek common ground. There just isn't. There are divergent philosophies that until people decide that divergent philosophies don't serve us well. And we're at that point with this matter and with many others. So I think the data's clear. We got a problem. Let's go after it. Let's find a solution for Connecticut, not what California, New York, or Texas decides. It's got a problem.
Thank you.
Sorry. As a centrist, I have to disagree with you. There is great desire to work together and find common ground. However, when I say that we need to be data driven, I'm not talking about that there isn't enough data to see that there's a problem. I'm talking about utilizing data to see how it best is fixed, because just jumping in and saying 90 days for everybody doesn't necessarily fix the problem either.
And
I recognize what you're saying, but I think it is a little bit more complicated. And that I did say that the idea that I had surrounding juvenile court and utilizing the juvenile review boards, like I said, is a long-term project, and it's not something that we can get done. But I recognize that there is a need to do something in the short term, and I look forward to someone like Representative Fishbein, who is on the Judiciary Committee and is a lawyer, and seems to have, of all things in the world that he seems to have a centrist view on, it's this. And I think that Representative Fishbein and myself and Senator Abrams, and I'm not going to speak for anyone else who didn't speak up and say what they support, but it seems as though when we work together, we will come up with hopefully a way to address this. But I wouldn't say that there aren't people who aren't willing to do that.
Well, I was only saying that I think it's simpler than it seems. I just think there is a clear answer. I'm not saying it's black and white, but I'm saying there's been a departure from norms in the past that have been successful, and we've gone too far past those norms. Call me crazy, but that's what I think.
I mean, mandatory minimums were never successful. When we talk about the National Crime Bill, that didn't work either. So that's the data I'm talking about, is to look at that and see what was actually the consequences of those harsh realities that we put in place just to punish in order to punish. Punish for punishment's sake doesn't work. Punishment along with rehabilitation does work. That's the data that we're looking at, and that's the data that is there. That's the data that has been accumulating for years, and that's what I think we should go off of.
Chairman Orris, if
Yes,
I may.
Mr. Fishbein, thank you.
Thank you. Just briefly. Councilman Slocum, one of the things that I just have to dicker with you a bit, you had said that we don't have enough judges. A couple of
No, I
years
didn't say we don't. I didn't say we don't. I think maybe it's something we don't have enough.
Okay, I just wanted to, a couple of years ago, there were approximately 20 judges that the chief court administrator did tell us he didn't need those judges, that he had more than enough judges already. Part of the problem is court staff, marshals to man a courtroom, court reporters, that kind of stuff. We also have right now, you've got the perfect storm because COVID has significantly altered the situation in this state. That combined with the police accountability bill, which I have to say, I talked to a lot of police officers, and there's an apprehension this year compared to last year of doing their job to the full extent because they're concerned. The qualified immunity situation created a concern. One of the portions of the bill says that if you sue a police officer merely for equitable relief, you can't claim qualified immunity. So if a police officer gets into a fight with someone or a group of people and they all get hurt and they sue the officer for their medical bills, no qualified immunity. One fight like that, unfortunately, that's a good $15,000 to $20,000 in medical bills that's going to come out of the officer's pocket. So if you're under that situation, are you more apt to get into those altercations? The court system itself with our justice, I have a client who was arrested for drunk driving in the beginning of July, and then he got arrested again 2 weeks later. And his case, this guy should have an interlock device on his vehicle, right, to protect public safety. He still hasn't gotten arraigned yet. He's not going to get arraigned until February. That's just an example of what's going on out there under COVID, and it's snowballing, unfortunately. But we're going to try and address everything that you have in your list. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Fishbein. Yes, Chief Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just want to weigh in a little bit on this, on the juvenile justice part of it. Certainly I think there's going to be opportunities for the legislature to speak with various groups like the Police Chiefs Association when the session gets rolling about the concerns we have about the police accountability bill. Although certainly some of the folks who were behind that have certainly indicated that some matters are just off the table completely and won't be revisited. But certainly the use of force, is something that I think there's at least an acknowledgement that there are some concerns there. But look, the juvenile justice stuff, I think the problem is that the pendulum swung all the way in the wrong direction. And somebody said, part of it before, like, you can't go more than a week without reading something in one of the papers around the state about how police arrested a juvenile in possession of a stolen car, and it's there are now 4th or 5th pending stolen vehicle case. When we were on last time, I just with the council, not with the legislators, I spoke about the case in Hartford where the young person was taken into custody at about 8 o'clock in the evening, driving a stolen car, taken to the police department, processed, released on the summons, which is the only thing you can do now, right? Everybody knows that, right? You're not allowed, basically, judges don't really have any power to detain a juvenile in any kind of secure facility, even if it's their 5th or 6th felony, for this at 12:30, so 4.5 hours later, that juvenile is arrested again, driving another stolen car in the city. If somebody or anybody out there thinks that that juvenile is being well served by not going to juvenile detention, I don't know that there's data anywhere that's going to that would support that fact. That child needs to be protected, even if it's from themselves. Somebody else mentioned it too. I know how this ends, right? I've been doing this 31 years. It ends with a car full of kids from somewhere, ramming into a tractor trailer somewhere, losing control of a car on a snowy night like we're going to have soon, and end in a pile of bodies somewhere on the side of the road. And it turns out that 3 out of the 4 of them had multiple pending cases. But there's, if you talk to people in the juvenile justice system, prosecutors in particular, they will tell you that all the leverage that they ever had has gone away over the last, say, 5 to 6 years. They just have no leverage. These kids, they don't show up in court because there's no consequence to even multiple failing to appear in juvenile court. There's nowhere to send them because the state shut down the juvenile detention facility before it really had anything in place to help. And I understand, I'm not saying that you take 14, 13, 12-year-old kids and put them in Manson or Long Lane or some other facility and just forget about them till they turn 18. That doesn't serve anybody. But when you have kids who multiple different times are being arrested again and again for these types of incidents, you have to be able to do something, because if they're beyond parental control and they're not getting those consequences at home, at some point the purpose of the justice system is to protect us from them. I know there's a case, some of you represent parts of Wallingford too. There was a case not that long ago in Wallingford where a homeowner had a firearm pointed at him when he confronted kids in his garage because they did exactly what somebody said. The car in the driveway was unlocked. They hit the garage door opener. The garage door went up. The homeowner went out and was basically accosted at gunpoint and told to back off, which he did to his credit, and the kids just left. But as somebody mentioned, that's one kid's lack of judgment in that case, and that's a horrible tragedy. Or the converse, it's the guy who comes out into his garage to see what's going on, armed with his own firearm, and the next thing you know, it's the 14-year-old who's lying in the driveway dead, with all that's going to entail for everybody. So again, nobody's saying every time a kid gets caught in a stolen car that we should lock them up and throw away the key. On the other hand, I think a lot of these things are put forward by people who think that that it's just a bunch of bored 16-year-olds who are going around playing mailbox baseball and doing a bunch of criminal mischief to your mailbox or stealing a pack of gum from the Walmart or something like that. That's not the case. These kids are, we're in the process now of investigating a case in conjunction with New Haven, where they have a car that's registered in Cheshire that they believe was stolen, but we don't have a report on it yet. But it's in their evidence bay because it's got bullet holes and blood in it. Now I see the intelligence bulletins that go out every week, and we get them every Thursday from the state. And I can't, at least once a week, if not, maybe it's once every 2 weeks, there's a request for information from a police department somewhere that's recovered a stolen car that has bullet holes in it. The other night, I'm sure you're all familiar with, there was video on the thing, 100 cars broken into in Newington over the course of one evening. There has to be some consequence for these kids. Again, nobody's saying, right, you're 13 years old, you got caught joyriding in a stolen car, you were sitting in the back seat, you might not even know it. You know what, we're going to run you down to Manson and we're going to put you there until you turn 18. And nobody, that's not what we're saying. But again, the fact that the judges can't do anything to them, even after multiple cases, something has to give. It's going to be either themselves or some innocent third party who pays the price for this. And this being the land of steady habits, that's when the pendulum will swing back, probably a little bit too far in the other direction, but there will be a lot of pressure on you folks up in Hartford to do something if there turns out to be a tragedy that costs the lives of an innocent third party, or a car full of juvenile car thieves or car burglars who slide off the road into a ditch because they don't know how to drive and they're all killed, God forbid. So again, nobody's calling for for some sort of juvenile death penalty or mandatory minimum sentencing. But if you speak to people who actually work in the juvenile courts, they will tell you that they are frustrated by the fact that they have absolutely no leverage by which they can hold these kids accountable anymore. And I've heard it time after time after time from people who are involved in those situations. If the court can't force them to go into and get treatment because there's no consequence if they don't, then I don't know that you're helping the kid either. Maybe the kid's better off not being in juvenile detention. But again, if they're just out stealing cars, shooting people, getting shot at themselves, I don't know who you've helped. But I certainly don't think it's them. And again, as somebody mentioned, I'm more than willing. I think all of you have my direct email at one point or the other, or my phone number. More than willing to discuss any of these things further with you. I'm a board member of the Police Chiefs Association. I'm sure I'll be asked to go up and testify in front of some committee or another at some point in the not too distant future, unless we're doing it by Zoom, which I'm also happy to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief Dreif. And Ms. Lenahan, I think you had a quick response. Then we're going to go to Mr. Veliver and then to Mr. Walsh. Did we lose Ms. Lenahan? I know she had said she wanted a brief response. We may have lost her. Until she comes back, why don't we go to you, Mr. Veliver?
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chief, thank you for your comments. I think that the council really appreciates your insight on these things, and and your comments at the last council meeting really, obviously were very informative and helpful, and it actually inspired a constituent of mine to sort of comment on the juvenile justice and the police accountability bills. So I don't want to make this too long, but I just wanted to read a quick statement that the person had. This is a constituent of mine. Said in his recent letter to the Cheshire Herald, our Chief of Police Neil Dreif voiced his continued concerns about the recent police accountability bill and with juvenile justice reforms that have been enacted over the last decade. These changes diminish the safety of our community without aiding the troubled young people they were intended to serve. The Chief's concern about the use of force provision in the accountability bill is one I share. Police officers in every town must make swift and difficult judgment calls on a regular basis to second-guess reasonable decisions in safety and at leisure without certain knowledge of what the officers saw and felt is a disservice to the men and women who put themselves at risk to protect us. The people who we rely on to keep us secure in our homes deserve our trust. Attempts to dictate from a distance every aspect of their behavior sets them up for harm and reduces their ability to keep us safe, making the police liable for dangerous situations which the criminals themselves have provoked is simply not acceptable. The chief also cites changes to the consent to search laws, which enable proactive policing. As a mother who pays attention to the lives of our youth, I know that these searches often result in the confiscation of illegal weapons and drugs. That is a public good, which the accountability bill has undermined. Legislators who support these restrictions on our police should ask themselves if they would want their spouse to undertake this dangerous job with these restrictions in place. And we should ask ourselves if we do our young people any favors when we give them a pass on theft, or if in fact we are setting them up for a life in the adult criminal system. I urge you to support Chief Drife and ask our state delegation to address his concerns for the safety of our police, citizens, and those juveniles who are already at risk. If we care about the future of these kids, then we cannot accept such behaviors from them. Sincerely, Pam Salamone, 659 Cornwall Avenue. So thank you for that opportunity to provide her thoughts on these issues as well. And thank you, Chief, for your comments.
Of course, Mr. Veliver. I mean, that's what it's all about, having a dialogue that we can all understand what we're thinking. So I see Ms. Linehan has come back. I know you had a brief response. I think you wanted to Chief Drife, and then we'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize for that. I'm sorry I missed that letter. So what I wanted to just say is to the chief directly, and I can't find you. There you are in my screen. I don't disagree with you. And I think I just want to make really, really clear. We're all wanting what you were talking about. And I believe what you're talking about is that middle road. I don't believe that children should be given a free pass because they're children. I believe that there should be consequences. The system that I'm looking at possible implementation of, I stress that it's possible, actually does hold them accountable. And I believe that when we implement these things, the hope is that we're not getting to recidivism. And when they do offend again, then they're placed into those staff secure facilities or locked facilities. So and I understand Chief and I have had this discussion before, and I think that we're closer on this than he believes. But I think it's also important for people of Cheshire to realize that no one is saying that they shouldn't be held accountable. What I am trying to get across is that I think that they should be given a proper chance to be rehabilitated. And if they don't accept that or they can't adhere to it, then we can get tougher on them so that if they reoffend or if they don't complete that program, then we are actually talking about staff secure facilities or locked facilities. But I just think that like Craig Fishbein said earlier, we give adults the ability for advanced rehabilitation or what it's called. We're just not doing that for kids in a way that is meaningful. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ms. Linehan. Thank you. Thank you to Chief. And we'll go over to Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for taking the time for being here tonight. Representative Linehan, I'm glad you brought up the school modernization as being a member of that committee. I mean, we have quite a bit of work ahead of us to get to the point where we need to get the grants, and it is good to keep you guys in the loop, and we will make sure that especially Senator Abrams is kept in the loop, because we are going to be counting on you to make sure that we do get the proper grants that we are going to need for this large expenditure that we see coming. So I appreciate you bringing that up. That's an important thing. In terms of what Chief Drive was just saying, he could probably tell you the percentages of car thefts that have gone up year after year after year over the past 3 years, and it just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. And when you hear of a kid who's arrested and then let out and then arrested again, there is a problem. And I agree. You don't want to throw them all in jail, but there has to be some kind of penalty to keep them from continuing to do the things that they're doing. And I'm hoping that it's not an easy solution, and I appreciate the hard work that you're all putting into it, but we need to come to a consensus. It shouldn't be a partisan idea. It should be a total bipartisan where we all agree we need to stop this. We all know there's a problem, and we just need to figure out a way to stop it. But I have one question to you, Representative Linehan, because I know you've been pretty vocal on your defense of the Police Accountability Act, and maybe you can explain to us why you don't feel there's a big issue with that that act, and why do you foresee any changes coming down the road for that? Because I know our chief has been very vocal in his opinions on what he feels would be the best way to help our police officers do their job properly. But I just want to find out from you what your feelings are on that.
Well, I think my feelings are that I never said that it was a perfect act. And I have said consistently over and over again that it still needs work. However, I'm not here to debate that. What I will say is this, is that over the past few months that there was discussion, and I'm sure Chief Drive, as the Chiefs Association, can attest. My leadership had said that they were very close to a deal on putting some legislative fixes for this during the special session. But unfortunately, there was big pushback on that from the other side of the aisle, because they wanted to use this as a campaign issue. Thank you. My husband's like, campaign, as a campaign issue. And yes, that's true. And it seems there's a discussion here. If you want to debate the bill, that seems to me like it's just going to be another campaign issue, albeit for the municipal elections. But if you like work together,
I'm not looking for a debate. I'm not looking for a debate. Excuse me. I'm not looking for a debate. I just want to find, I'm just trying to figure it out myself. And I think there's a lot of people in my shoes who are trying to figure it out as well. So we're just trying to figure out, do you foresee changes coming down the road, and
yes,
and what kind of changes do you feel are necessary to make it a better one for everybody?
So do I see changes coming down the pike? You know, as a very vocal member of the moderates in the House, I will say, yeah, we've been working on that. And we have said that that is something that's important to us. Whether it's going to be all the changes that everyone's asking for, I don't know. I don't sit on that committee. I am not part of it. And the way that it works is that the Judiciary Committee is going to see that through, and they will pass whatever changes that they want out of that. And then we will vote on that as a full legislature. I'm not involved in the day-to-day work on that. So I'm afraid that I'm unable to give you the information that you seek today. However, I can tell you that as a caucus, it has been discussed. Although I will say this, that, you know, it made an issue in the election, and that there was a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of attacks made on those of us who to support it. But I will also say that not many of us lost our seats. So I urge you to think about, while you may be hearing about so many people who are against it, I can tell you that the majority of the people that vote for me that live in Cheshire actually do agree with some sort of police accountability. And if this bill is not the perfect law and we have the ability to go back and change it, I'm all for that. But I would caution you to not sit in an echo chamber and think that there aren't people that support it, because there are.
I'd never said that. I know there are people who support it, just like there are a number of people who support everything. You're right. I get it. I get it. No, and I appreciate the response, because that's all I'm looking for, is just we're all trying to figure our way through this bill, because it's not an easy one to understand at times. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Mr.
Chairman,
Walsh, thank you for that.
I'm sorry to
And Ms.
interrupt, but
Flanagan for that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Abrams. I'll get right to you in a minute.
no, I have to leave.
Oh, okay, Ms. Abrams. I'm sorry.
Till 7:30, so I apologize, but I have another obligation. So
yeah, no problem. Thank you for being, and I know we lost a couple of other members, and I had assumed this was going to be about an hour, but I will tell you, I think this dialogue is really helpful, and I think for a lot of reasons, and especially for the public who are watching, and I hope there are some that they're watching and realizing that we can all have a respectful dialogue. We may disagree, but the way we get to some amicable solution is to have these kinds of conversations and be open and honest with each other. So I'm really appreciative of this dialogue. So thank you all. Ms. Abrams, thank you for coming. Hopefully we'll see you soon. And we're going to continue along as much as we have questions and comments, as far as I'm concerned, because this is all good.
Very much. Thank you very much, Chairman. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And again, I would say my door, my email, my phone, whatever, is always open to any of you individually or collectively, because I really do want to work with you to do the best we can for Cheshire.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. Appreciate it. Good night. Mr. Slocum, I see you waving.
Yeah, I also have to wave goodbye. I apologize. I don't normally bail out on a meeting, but I do have to. So I wanted to wish everyone thank you and for your time and energy. And I'm sure I'll see you again. But if I don't before Christmas, have a very merry one and a happy Hanukkah for all those involved. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. And I see Mr. Talbot raising his hand. Was that just a goodbye to Mr. Slocum?
That was a wave.
To Ms. Abrams and Mr. Slocum. Well, listen, let's continue along. I think it's good dialogue. Thank you, Ms. Linehan, for your comments, and Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh, are you all set for the moment? Okay, thank you, sir. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the council? I don't see any. I think I saw Mr. Fishbein raising his hand. Mr. Fishbein?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The police accountability bill is very difficult to speak about with the public. Everybody, I think, is in favor of accountability for police. And everybody's against police brutality, right? Who's in favor, so everybody's against those kinds of things. So when you say to somebody, should police be held accountable? Yes. Well, then you must support this bill. I got to tell you, most people haven't read the 72 pages, the 144 lines, or the 1,444 lines of the bill. I hope that you guys take some time to read the language, which is tough up in the Capitol. All the bills that we have to review. I try to read every bill that comes through my hands, but it's tough when you just go off a title. A lot of that is public relations. So, there's good things in the bill. Most of it's really bad. But, to read it is really to know it. So that's all I have.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein, and I see Ms. Lenahan had to leave as well. And I thank you all. I know we had hoped to keep this to about an hour, but I think this dialogue is really, really helpful. I think the public probably assumes it is. I wish we could do this more often, and maybe that's something we can all strive for. I think it's very appropriate that we are all having these kinds of conversations, and certainly in a public forum. And, maybe it'll bring us toward being able to advance something in a collaborative manner that we think is not only good for the state, but good for Cheshire. Any other questions, comments from members of the council from the delegation that's left? Yes, Mr. Belliver.
I think Craig's the only one left. So, and no one's here to talk about, but one of the other questions I was going to ask is, we have our asks, and one of the things that we would want to, we want to see, but one of the things is, and maybe this is a topic for another discussion, is what things do the legislators see, especially those on the majority side, the majority caucuses, see coming as legislation that we don't even know of yet, but that they may have heads up on that may impact Cheshire that we're not even aware of yet. So maybe that's something for a future discussion. But I'm sure there's going to be proposals and other things that we're telling them things that we want. The question is, what should we be expect that's going to maybe coming from the other side and back from the municipality? So,
Dave, along that line, I was going to mention you're going to see a push to lift penalties against formerly convicted criminals. The erase your record process that we had last session. I've already getting language about it where, generally some of the provisions call for, if you've done your time and it's 5 years post your felony time, that your record is automatically erased. If it's 3 years past your misdemeanor time, your misdemeanor is already erased. That you cannot hold somebody's criminal history against them for housing purposes, which is troublesome. We had a lot of debate about this in 2019. So you get somebody who's been convicted of arson, you have to rent to them. I mean, that's troubling. You get somebody who has been convicted of let's say a bad sex crime involving a child. You have to give them a job at a daycare. We had this bill on the Labor Committee last session, and I asked those two questions during committee. and they admitted that under the language that they were going to put through, you would have to give those people jobs. I think that would affect the community of Cheshire. So that's just an example. You're also going to see a push to legalize marijuana. I don't know that that's going to be helpful to our society. It's a lengthy debate. Those are two of the big ones that come to my mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fishbein. And thank you for hanging in here. It sounds like you're the last one standing from the delegation. I know that about you, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, because I know all 5 of you work really hard, but you do work really hard as well, and I appreciate you hanging in there with us. So thank you for that. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none. Chief Drife, anything else from you? I really appreciate you hanging in there tonight with us, Chief. Your opinion is really important. Obviously, we respect you and your staff immensely as town council members, and we really need your continued input on a lot of these items. So thank you for being here tonight. And anything else you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be heard and to submit my my written remarks earlier. And again, I think there's going to be opportunity, on a statewide level for people in the policing profession to make our opinions known. But again, just I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys separately and to the legislators at this meeting. So thank you.
Okay, can I just ask Chief one question, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, Mr. Walsh. Go ahead.
We heard the other day Meriden Police arrested some juveniles that were involved in some thefts in Cheshire. Can you comment on that at all, or?
We're still following up on it. There was as a matter of fact, I had the Record Journal here today. I don't know if anybody saw today's paper, which was kind of but the upper right-hand corner here talks about the recent thefts. And then in the inside, there's one about the young man who was taken into custody. He had called for a lift, like the car riding, the police had arrived in response to a citizen's call. He had called a lift and was hiding in the backyard waiting to try to get out of the area. We're still following up on that. I believe it was some credit cards that the suspect who was taken into custody in Meriden had that were taken from a car in Cheshire. We're still following up on it. I don't have a lot of the details. I was sweating there for a minute. I thought you were going to ask me for those percentages that the car thefts have gone up.
I want to do that.
I didn't have them off the top of my head.
The next meeting you could do that.
Yeah. But believe me, tomorrow it's the first thing I'm checking.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. And again, thank you, Chief Drife, for being here and your participation. It's certainly very helpful. Your professionalism and your experience is greatly needed on these matters. So thank you for that. Again, one last time, any questions or comments from members of the council on any of the legislative items? Seeing none. Again, thank Fishbein and all 5 of our delegation for spending the time with us. I hope we can do more of this. I think it was very helpful, collaborative, and a good opportunity for the public to see some direct interaction, and hopefully we'll bear some fruit from this. So thank you for being here, Mr. Fishbein, and all the other 4 members of delegation that unfortunately had to check off. With that, we're going to move on to 2 other items on our agenda for this evening. Number 4, which is discussion and possible acceptance of Strollo Court as a town road. And with that, I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution number 121520-1. Be it resolved that the town council accepts Strollo Court as a town road, conditional upon the filing of a maintenance bond and recording of the warranty deed for the roadway and the storm drainage and sightline easements, free and clear of all encumbrances.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Barway. Mr. Walsh, back to you.
Well, I think I'll defer to Mr. Nowotny, who sent a letter regarding the reasoning why what they had to do to become to pass all the requirements to become a town road. So Mr. Nowotny is probably the best to explain that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Walsh, and thank you, Mr. Nowotny, for being here. Appreciate it. I know you got a lot on your plate with the big pending storm coming, so thank you for taking the time, George.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I have it on good authority. It's not going to snow tomorrow, so we're going to be good. But in case it does, we'll be ready to plow Strollo Court, subject to the council's approval. It's a great subdivision in town. It's constructed to a high standard, so we're happy as the agents of the town to recommend the road be taken over, and we're ready to plow it. Mr. Kimball has many of the documents that need to be filed in his office at this point after the council's action, and we'll plan to begin plowing it tomorrow night if it's going to start snowing at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watney. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council on this matter? Yes, Mr. Barwi?
Just briefly, generally, they don't take quite this long to come through. Were there issues, or is it just a matter of getting the paperwork in order by the developer and the town?
Was that directed to me, Mr. Borway?
Well, I assume so. I really don't know who to direct it to, but I'm just curious why this one's so long. The next one that we're going to be doing is very quick, and somewhere in between is how long they usually take. So I'm wondering if there's a problem with it that we had to make them fix, or was it just delay for paperwork?
I think just delay for paperwork. We
okay.
Planning and zoning, I know has seen it, but we've been very satisfied with what's gone on out there, and they've done some minor rework as is normal with any subdivision, but it was a good effort on our part, that's for sure, from our part.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Barwi. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none, I have just a couple of quick statements or questions, Mr. Nowotny. Just to confirm, you have all of the approvals necessary. I know it needs to go through planning and zoning. You have that, and all of the legalese that we would need in terms of warranty deeds and things of that nature. All that is done, correct?
Yeah, the most all the paperwork is done. I meant to inventory it today, but we have everything at least ready for signature, or it's down to the point where there's no lingering issues. I'll say that, or anything that's a question at this point.
Okay, so obviously it's something you fully support and hopefully
Correct.
approve.
Yeah.
Right? Great, thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Nowotny. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, discussion and possible acceptance of Beechwood Court as a town road. Ms. Pavano?
Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 121520-2. Be it resolved that the council accepts Beechwood Court as a town road conditional upon the filing of a maintenance bond, recording of the warranty deed for the roadway and the storm drains and site line easements, free and clear of all encumbrances pursuant to Planning and Zoning Commission approval.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Back to you, Ms. Pavano.
I'm going to ask Mr. Nowotny to handle this also, since he was involved in this approval.
Sure. Again, this is very similar. Another well-done subdivision as far as the town standards go. We heartily endorse taking over the road. It's built to a high quality, and all the right-of-way treatments are complete. Again, everything's been negotiated as far as the deeds and all the paperwork. So it's a matter of signatures, which can come anytime, and we're very satisfied with accepting this road on behalf of the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nowotny. I see Ms. Talbot raising your hand.
I would just like to mention that the Planning and Zoning Commission did approve this road. It was last night's meeting, so we just got they reported it to us today, but that approval has been finalized as well for Beechwood Court.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Talbot, for that. Any questions or comments from members of the council on this?
I just had a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this, I'm not familiar with where this is. I was able to find Strollo Court. I was familiar with that, but where is Beechwood Court?
This is, it's off a mountain, right near Sorghum Mill, where Sorghum Mill comes out to Mountain in that vicinity, not
Yeah, on
directly
the other
across.
side.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
If you're heading towards Hamden, Sorghum Mill will be on your left.
Yeah.
Right past that on the right is the entrance to Beechwood. So
Okay.
it's right down
So
there.
it's a cul-de-sac as well?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just south of Cornwall Avenue and Cornwall Avenue Extension.
Right. Okay.
It's- George, it's like a dozen homes, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's exactly 12.
Okay. That's
which is about a dozen.
More
Very good.
voters in the 4th district, Mr. Talbot.
That's how I know how many homes are there.
Any other questions or comments, from members of the council on this? Seeing none, obviously another straightforward deal. Thank you, Mr. Nwat. Call for a vote.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. So thank you for that. Thank you all for coming to this special meeting. I know we're all busy with the holiday season and obviously with COVID. So thank you all for taking the time. I want to again thank all 5 members of our legislative delegation for spending as much time as they did with us tonight. I personally found it very informative. Again, we may agree to disagree, but respectful collaboration is the way forward on every matter, in my opinion. So I'm glad we've had this dialogue tonight. I hope we can continue forward with more of this with them and hopefully advance some of these items on our list for the benefit of our Cheshire community. And with that, I'll just wish everybody a happy holiday, a Merry Christmas to the extent we don't see each other. Looks like we may have a white Christmas if, unless Mr. Nowotny, you're wrong. You said we're not going to get any snow, but it looks like we're going to get something. So hopefully we have a white Christmas. I think we could all use that. And I thank you all for being here tonight. So with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So
Moved. Second.
It looks like it was moved by Mr. Talbot, seconded by Mr. Jinks. All those in favor? Always a unanimous motion to adjourn. Again, good night and happy holiday to everybody.
Good night, everybody.